black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. How's everyone doing on this Sunday evening? I hope wherever you're at, wherever you're listening to this podcast at, I hope it's nice and warm. I know out here in the Pacific Northwest, the snow and the wind went away. At least here in the valley it went away, but it's still cold, but it's mainly just rain coming down. It's cold outside. I'm just glad the windstorm went away. I know there for a couple days, between the wind and the snow, my power was up and down. I wasn't feeling that good. Yeah, my internet was up and down, and it seemed like one thing after another, but like anything else, you just roll with the punches. But how are you guys doing tonight? Thank you again for listening tonight. You know, I posted this audio file on the blog, and it was actually taken by the Grassman58. It's a YouTuber that goes by the name Grassman58. He says that it was recorded in late October at Lake Ellen in Ferry County, Washington. He writes, "First night out camping, I left out the recorder for the night and went to bed. At around 11 p.m. to about 12:30 a.m., all these sounds were recorded. Not sure what to make of these. I've never heard anything like this before in the woods. I wanted to share these sounds with a few others before posting them. Has anyone heard anything like this before?" And it's interesting. I'll play the clip for you here in a moment. But it's interesting when you listen to the clip, at first I thought, oh, that's a fox. But then towards the end of the vocalization, it doesn't really sound like a fox. It's interesting. Here, I'll play it for you. Tell me what you think of this. Grassman58 on YouTube. I subscribe to him. He puts up pretty good stuff, actually. I really enjoy a lot of his videos, and I post a lot of his stuff to the blog. If you get a chance, check it out. I'd be curious to see what you guys think of this. I mean, it's a weird sound, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if it's a fox, actually, after going back and listening to it, but it's weird. It's a weird noise. And where he actually got that audio isn't far from Spokane. I mean, it's a distance from Spokane, but that would be the nearest city in Washington State that he actually captured those sounds. And in that area actually is notorious for Bigfoot sightings. So let me know what you think. I'd be real curious to see what you guys think of that. You know, it's that time of year again when we give and we receive gifts. And anyone out there that you think is interested in Bigfoot, Sasquatch, like Sasquatch Chronicles, or is just into the topic, if you go to sasquatchchronicles.com, at the very top on the right-hand corner, you can click on Shop, and there's a lot of cool items in there you can buy for loved ones. I can tell you my two favorite items are the zip-up hoodie the gray zip-up hoodie I wear all the time. Absolutely love it. It keeps you warm, but it's not too hot to wear. Absolutely love it. The other item I wear all the time is the Sasquatch Chronicles beanie, the black one. Absolutely love it. I wear it all the time. Keeps my keeps my shaved head warm. But even if you don't have a shaved head, it's a cool item to wear. They're high quality clothing items. It's not like just a bunch of Walmart shirts plastered on Sasquatch Chronicles on there. It's actually really high quality gear. So if you get a chance and you're looking for a gift for yourself or you're looking for a gift for family members, check out SasquatchChronicles.com, click on the shop button, and get yourself something nice. And before we jump into the show, it's kind of funny. Myself and Duke and Woody were all sitting around one time on Skype, and we were just talking. I mean, just sitting there just talking about stuff that interests us. And Woody and Duke started a new podcast. It's called the Renegade Podcast. You can find it on iTunes and Stitcher. And they're kind enough to invite me along as a guest. Whenever I have time, I jump on there and chat with the guys. But it's really a podcast about nothing. It's just different topic items. It's kind of a funny podcast. It gets serious at times. But I told the guys they could come on and promote it. If you get a chance, again, it's called the Renegade Podcast. Look for the cowboy in the logo. And you get to hear Woody and Duke. And when I have time, I'll jump on there as a guest with those guys and chat it up. I know we've done, I think they've done like 2 podcasts so far. And I've been on both of them. Don't know, I'd recommend it for children. I know there's some swearing in it, but it's just kind of a fun podcast. It's not about Bigfoot or Sasquatch, so if you're looking for that, that's not what the podcast is about. But I told the guys they could come on and promote it. Most of you remember my brother Woody. Woody, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here tonight.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for having me here again tonight.
And we also have Duke. Duke, how are you tonight, man?
Doing great, Wes. How about yourself?
Doing good. Doing good. Merry Christmas to both of you guys. Happy holidays.
Hey, Merry Christmas.
And I know I wanted to invite you guys back on. I know there's a new show out there called the Renegade Podcast, and you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, and probably everywhere else. But Woody and Duke are the hosts, and they put up with me coming on as a guest. And how would you describe the podcast?
Well, it's kind of hard to actually describe. It's it's a pretty free, open-minded podcast, and it moves real fast. So buckle up. So all sorts of different topics. One minute we could be talking about some sort of political issue, and then next thing you know, we could be talking about an ex-girlfriend of mine. I don't know. It goes pretty quick. And more or less, it's just one of those kind of shows to where we're let's sit back, let's have a good time. There's serious moments in part of the show, and not so serious moments of the show. And I hope everybody likes it. I like it so far. So, Duke, what do you think, buddy?
Most of the humor in there just happens organically because we like to pick on each other regularly, but for the most part, it's just a wild hodgepodge of chaotic conversation loosely tied together by whatever sort of structure we tend to come up with from certain subjects that we want to talk about.
I agree, and Wes and I were talking earlier, and I apparently you guys had a conversation kind of about the show, and I'm not sure how you put it, Wes. Maybe you're gonna have to tell me does it dysfunctional makes functional, or how did you say that?
Dysfunction makes function.
Dysfunction makes function, and that's really that's kind of what it's about. And we've had some pretty good feedback. And Wes, like Wes said, it's available on Stitcher and iTunes and everywhere else. So check it out. Let us know what you think.
It's not really a Bigfoot podcast. It's just kind of what it reminds me of, and I appreciate you guys letting me be a part of it, but what it reminds me of is us just sitting around a campfire talking. I mean, really, that's what it is. It's the conversations we have in real life and the stuff that interests us, and it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. If you get a chance, check it out. It's the Renegade Podcast on Stitcher and iTunes. Look for the cowboy in the logo. Guys, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Wes, thanks a lot. Duke, it's good to hear your voice again tonight, and I know that you and I would be talking earlier in the week again. And Wes, I want to thank you as well for coming on the show and keeping the reins on Duke and I both.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of ball breaking, that's for sure.
There is. It's
every shot I get at Woody, I take. And this one's a little bit different because we don't have to sit and talk about Bigfoot. I can just take shots whenever I want.
Yeah, we all got to kind of have some thick skin here. So it's interesting. You know, if you really do, if you get a chance, check it out. And let me know what you think. Let Duke as well know what you think. It's really meant to be a lot of fun, and it's turning out that way. So thanks again, Wes. I'm sure I'll be talking to you early in the week as well.
Thanks, guys. Duke, thanks so much, man.
You're welcome. Enjoy the infotainment, guys.
And again, it's the Renegade Podcast. Look for the Cowboy. You can find it on Stitcher and iTunes and probably any other podcast player. Thanks again, guys. A lot of fun I had with those guys. And like I said, whenever I get a chance, I'll pop on there. Woody and Duke, the Renegade Podcast. Check it out if you get a chance. Well, let's get down to it tonight. I want to remind you, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. I'd love to hear about your encounter. I'd love to speak with you. Let's go to Illinois with Pat. And Pat has an interesting encounter when he was out there fishing one night. He's had a lot of things go on and around this area where he actually fishes, and it's not far from his property, actually. Pat, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks, Wes. Glad to be here.
And if you would, I know you had two major encounters. One was when you were younger with your dad, and then you actually had a visual sighting of the creature. If you would, let's start with when you were younger. Would you tell the audience what you were out doing, and then, if you don't mind, just kind of walk us into the encounter?
Okay. This happened in the fall in the early 70s. I'm not sure what year it was. But we belonged to this one club that was pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. They had trap shooting, they had fishing ponds, they even had a clubhouse there. But late fall, nobody is really there. And we'd been fishing up the big lake on top of the hill and wasn't catching anything, so we went down to the smaller lake. Well, we were fishing with our backs were basically to the woods. It was probably about 100, 150 feet from the edge of the woods. And we were fishing, catching crappie and bluegill and stuff, and no big deal. And I heard, it was a pretty calm day, and I heard like a dead branch snap. And I even made the comment to my dad, because I was real little. I said, well, I guess you do hear a tree when it falls in the woods and nobody's around. And he made the comment, how would you know we're around? It's like, okay, whatever, you know. So we're fishing, and all of a sudden at once, it was a low growl to a scream, like a whoa. And I looked back at the woods. I wasn't really afraid at that time. And then I went to look back at my dad, and he was running basically for the car with his tackle box in one hand and his rod in the other, and me and my mom were still standing there. And my dad was a Korean War vet, and he didn't flinch off of anything. When I seen him run, then I panicked. And so we went and chased him back in there. Well, we had fish on a stringer. And he told me to go back and get the stringer, and I absolutely refused. And it was the first time that I ever really cussed at my dad. I'm like, if you want the blank stringer, you go get it. So he had my mom get on the driver's side, driving the car. He opened up the passenger door. He ran down there, got the stringer, and came back. And we left. We didn't see anything. But he told my mom, if something comes out of them woods, he goes, I'm diving in the car, you punch it and get us out of here. That was pretty much my first ever dealing with this. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't till much later, like, you know, maybe a month or two or so, whatever, that Boggy Creek came out. And we actually went and seen that movie, but I didn't know anything, you know, about Bigfoot or anything else like that up until that point.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, the noise that you guys heard that day, have you heard anything comparable to it online, or have you looked up anything comparable to it online and thought, oh, that's it?
The Ohio call.
The Ohio call is the one.
I mean, yeah, because it went so low. It was lower than, I can't even make a sound that low now. Up to such a high-pitched frequency that, there's no way. And it lasted probably 20 seconds at least. And this would have been right on the edge of the woods, because between where we were fishing and the woods, it was mowed grass. They had like swing sets for the kids and a horseshoe pit. So it was all open right to there. but I would say the Ohio call.
Yeah, and that Ohio call, I mean, that's a interesting call. That was recorded back in 1994, and I know most of the audience has probably heard it. Here's the Ohio call that Pat is referencing. And Pat, for your dad to get up and run after hearing that, I know did you say Vietnam war vet? Those guys hardly ever run from anything.
Well, he was a Korean War vet.
Or Korean War vet. Yeah, a veteran in general. You'd be hard-pressed to get those guys to run from much because they've seen so much. They've experienced so much. I know recently you actually ran into the creature. Do you mind telling that story, what happened to you?
Okay, that was last Friday, and I believe that was December 2nd. Okay, we belong out to this fishing club. And the ironic thing about this is a different club, different area, is the club's probably 12 miles away from the lake. This lake is a strip mine lake. It's a T-shaped lake. And there's no houses around this lake. It's just nothing but farmland and woods. And so usually me and my son, we do a lot of night fishing for bass, sometimes walleye, but mainly bass. Well, on this occasion, I went by myself. And so I got to lake probably about 4 o'clock because it gets dark out here right now about 4:30. And I'd been fishing, wasn't doing too great, wasn't doing too bad, nothing major. And about 10:30, I came around. If you picture a T, a capital T, I'm coming from the right side, going towards the long part of the T, just around past the bend, starting to go down towards the channel. And I heard a growl. Now, this night, of course, there's no frogs or no crickets, but there is nothing. There's no owls. You're not hearing any coyotes. It was above freezing. It was dead calm. There's a light fog on the water because I remember the water temperature was 44.6 degrees on my depth finder. And your temperature is probably mid-30s, I would guess. So there's a little bit of fog on the water and the water only, but I heard this growl. Well, I'm probably 35 feet from the bank because it is a strip mine. I don't have to be way offshore. I can pretty much run right on it. So I stepped down off the deck. I get a 2 million candlelight spotlight. I clicked it, turned it to that area, and it was dead. What I found out later after the fact is I recharged it. It went right to a green charge. You pulled it. It lit for about a second or two and died, so the battery internally is dead. But, that's just basically my luck at the time. So this thing is growling, and it's getting more intense. And I had a run-in with something I never seen probably 4 years before, which prompted me to go out and buy a pistol. So I stepped down. I have a Taurus PT 111 Millennium Pro with FMJ's full metal jackets, 12-round clip. I had 2 clips with me. Locked and loaded, put in that direction because I couldn't see anything at this time. Slowly, this thing stood up. There's four boats on the ground turned upside down from people who might use them. Some of them have not moved in years. And a bush. This thing stood up. And what gets me is if it hadn't have growled and if it wouldn't have stood up, I would have went right past it and never known it was there. But it just stood up, so I've got my weapon trained on it. I'm about 35 feet from the bank. It's probably about 15 feet off the bank, just beyond where the boats were. I could see it from the waist up. Guessing, because visibility was pretty good, I would have to say somewhere 600, maybe a little more, 650, 700 pounds. It was 7.5 to 8 feet tall. And I'm pretty accurate on that because I'm 6'4". My boat casting deck is about 1.5 feet, off the water. And I was pretty much just about looking about head level, about where eye level would be with this. It was dark. I'm guessing that it was black, but its face was a lighter color. You really couldn't see any detail in it. And its arms were down by its side. Its hands we're basically about to where its knees are at. So it looks at me. We're kind of in a slight Mexican standoff, I guess, so to speak, for about 2 or 3 seconds, and it turns to its left to walk. Well, as it turns, it still had the upper part of its body angled towards me, watching me. And so I'm wanting to put distance between me and this thing. I've still got my weapon trained on it. So I stepped on my trolling motor, it's foot controlled. I turned it left to get away from it. I didn't want to turn it right because then my back would be to it and I would actually start to put the back of the boat closer to shore. As I almost got 180 degrees from it, this thing turned at once, threw its hands up in the air, and I had told you it charged. What it basically did, it didn't run towards the bank. It dropped its hands down. It looked like it was almost running, like it did one hop off of like all fours. And what I mean by that is its hands hit the ground with like a big force, and its feet were propelled forward, and it stopped. And I told you earlier it had thrown its arms down violently. I don't know if it was to turn and propel itself or what the deal was. When this was going on, I spun the boat back around. I still have the gun trained on it. And it had very labored breathing. I had told you it was like it was hyperventilating, but it's like it breathed in through its nose and out its mouth, like, and I'm watching this thing, and I am just literally freaking. Because when it went down with its hands, I didn't know if it was going to pick something up and throw it at me. I didn't know if it was going to try to propel itself towards my boat or what the deal was. But it was squatted with its back almost straight and its chest kicking out, something like you would see a gorilla. And this lasted for maybe 4 or 5 seconds. And I had my gun, like I told you, trained on the genital area where I thought it would be, because I had a 9mm. I knew a chest shot wouldn't be anything if this thing came. But I was looking at the largest mass right at where I could get a lock on. Then it slowly kind of stood up, looked at me, its body turned, started walking away, and it was vocalizing as it left. And I don't mean a big yell. It's like like, and this thing was definitely pissed for some reason. I don't know if it was because I was there and it was hunting. I don't know anything. But I will tell you, I feel 100% confident if I did not have a gun, I'm not sure I would be here today. Because I'm fully 100% sold it knew what that gun was, because when I had that gun trained, everything changed. It was ready to walk away. As I was turning away, it's like my back, I was starting to go to it, but I was still had my arm off to the right, and it charged. And once I immediately spun the boat around, I mean, this thing covered 10 seconds in the bat, or 10 feet in the bat of an eye. And I have no doubt if it would have propelled itself, if it wouldn't have been able to get on my boat, it would have been close enough it could have grabbed something and got in my boat.
What did the creature do next? Did it just walk away?
It just kind of stood there. It was like real labored breathing. Like I said, like it was PO'd, and I am trained on, because I had turned the boat back around. Now this time, I'm starting to go out towards deeper water. I didn't, because I let off the trolling motor. I was faced on it, but my perpetual motion of the boat was taking me away, which was fine with me. And I was trained on it, and it went about 2 or 3 steps. It had its upper part of its body turned and was walking, and then it just kind of walked away. It started to go down the shoreline, but kind of up at an angle. And the way that it goes, they're real steep cliffs from where it washed away, on the strip line. And they're probably 80, 90 feet tall. But there's no way a person's going to climb it with the dirt or anything. And this thing just walked off, and it went right into the shadows. I could hear it. And I knew it was moving away from me, but I couldn't see it anymore. After that, it just kind of turned and walked off. And I'm not ever going night fishing out there again by myself. Never. I'll take my son or anybody else, but I will not go by myself.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Don't blame me at all. What was going through your mind at this time? I mean, what did you think you were looking at?
Oh, I knew what I had a good idea what I was looking at, because we have, like I sent you pictures, we have found tracks. And there's something I didn't tell you earlier that my son had brought up. And it would have been last year. There was a tree and over the wintertime or spring, it had fallen into the water. It had eroded off the bank. And this is probably maybe a 70, 80-foot tree. So it's laying in the water. We had went fishing the night before, and we fished until 8:30 or 9 at night. Probably it was in the summertime, so it's still light, and we're the only boat on the water. We did really great, and we decided, okay, we're coming back out here 4 o'clock the next morning, and it was just a normal nice day. We come out 4 o'clock the next morning. We go out there and fishing. And we kind of avoid that side of the lake because there's a lot of brush. You can't determine the shoreline from the bank, because it's all dark. So, but anyway, it started getting light, and there was a john boat probably 14 feet long that was sitting on top of that tree, the back towards the bank and the front towards out in the deeper water. And this boat was a foot off the water. And we took my bass boat, and we got up there and looked at it. We even kind of pulled on it a little bit. I mean, it was wedged in there. And there's some other people that end up coming up fishing. It's like, hey, did you notice that boat in there? They're like, yeah, a storm must have blown it in there. Well, it didn't storm that night. And, I mean, that's just some of the weird things. We've heard whoops. We had rocks thrown at us. And, I mean, but we had never had a visual. We knew these things were here, but we just had never seen them. You can go out some nights and all you hear is crickets, and you hear, owls and stuff, and you hear frogs, and everything's hunky-dory. And you go out other nights and there's not a cricket, there's not a frog, it's just a heaviness in the air, and something's there. It's just weird.
Yeah, that is weird. It's interesting. I went out one time with a special forces guy, and he was telling me, he was giving me the breakdown on crickets, how they'll do it in certain sequences. They'll go on and on and on, and then they'll shut off. And then they'll go on and on and on, and then they'll all stop. And I thought this guy was full of crap until I realized he was right. They'll go on and on and on, and then shut off. And the reason why he knew that is because he hunted men, and he would only move when the crickets moved. And then you could almost get it in a cycle. You could go when the crickets are going. You can move through the forest and be stealthy. And it's almost every, I don't know what the time is, but to give you an example, let's say every 45 seconds they shut off for 10 seconds, and then they turn back on. And this sounds crazy, but trust me, it's true. I thought it was BS until I found out it was true. But when you go into an area and everything's off, and it's off for a long time, no bullfrogs, no crickets, it's almost like you walk into a ghost town, and that shouldn't be, especially at night in the forest, because the forest really does come alive at night. And when you walk into an area and it's like a light switch, everything's off, and it's off for a long time. That's one of the weird things with Sasquatch that I guess I'll never understand, why everything goes dead quiet like that. And it does, man. It brings up the hairs on the back of your neck when that happens.
Oh, it does. I mean, me and my son, we'll sit there and it's like, man, it's going to be one of them nights. It just seems like everything gets out of the area. And this lake used to be covered with deer and pheasant and geese and ducks, and you'd see rabbits and, you'd see wild turkeys. And there's nothing. From March till October is when all the activity starts. I mean, you could basically take that period of clock until this year. We just don't have anything that happens, after the end of October and 1st of November. I don't know if because they get the corn out of the fields and maybe that pushes the deer someplace else. I don't know, but we can go there and anytime during the summertime, and you don't see a raccoon, you don't see a possum, you don't see nothing. It's just void of all wildlife.
And that doesn't really make any sense when it's like that. You know what I mean? It just doesn't add up. You guys were out down there in October, and you heard the dumpster being beat up. Do you mind telling that?
Oh,
What happened?
Okay, we were out there fishing, and it was a sunny day. Well, partly sunny, I guess. It wasn't really. And it was a cool day. So we're out there by ourselves on the lake, and it's probably about 3 p.m., and we are the only ones on this lake, and there's a big dumpster that sits up there. And it was like, bam, 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 like something just beating the living hell out of this dumpster. Well, we were in a position with the boat where we could kick around. You could see up there, but you couldn't see the dumpster. And we can see the only gate in from where we're at, and we heard no vehicles. So we fished for a while because we had been there since probably 4:30 in the morning. So we put up and left, and we pulled out. Of course, nobody's there. And you have to understand this lake is covered on 3 sides by a 7-foot fence. And the only way to come in is you would have to be a couple miles down the road and come in the back way through the woods to even get there. So we get up by there. We stopped, we had the boat hooked up. We went ahead and we stopped and we checked around. Well, the dumpster's full, first off. So it is, and it's full of like garbage bags and stuff. So it's not like something fell inside it. So I got a pretty sizable rock and kind of smacked on the side of it. My son's like, Dad, you aren't even near the sound of that. And that's just another one of the weird things that happen,
Yeah, was the dumpster damaged?
Well, it wasn't a brand new one anyway. I mean, I couldn't tell. I mean, there was dents on the side, but I don't know if that's because of use or because they got a used one that way or whatever, But this place every weekend would be full of campers and people sitting up there and drinking and partying and raising cane and doing the whole 9 yards. And there isn't nobody up there. And we were fishing about a month and a half ago. And we went early morning. We got there about 4 in the morning. We went by, and this area you can't launch a boat. There's an aluminum boat. There's a truck parked on one side, angled towards the water. It was backed up to the boat, and a car the other way. So it looked like an arrowhead pointing to the right. And there's a guy sitting there building a fire. I'm like, oh, it's like, you up here fishing? He goes, no. He goes, I worked until, he goes, I worked second shift. I didn't get here till about 2 in the morning. It's like, okay. So he's sitting there, and he's tending this fire, and he's getting all chatty with us. It's like he didn't want us to go. So no big deal. So once first light hits, they went ahead, loaded up, and they left. They left the boat there. That boat sat there for 3 weeks. It was a brand new Alumacraft boat. Just sit there. Now, I don't know if they ran into anything, but I don't know why anybody would get off of work, go to sit there a few hours, and leave at first sunlight. There's people that see things and hear things that our membership has pretty much dropped off. I don't know if
when you say
I pay
when you say membership, what do you mean for the audience?
The club membership. Okay, they have so many people that join the club, and they use it for like camping and fishing, and different stuff like that because they got multiple lakes around there. We're multiple ponds in one big lake. And we went a couple weeks ago and paid our dues. And there just wasn't a whole lot of people there paying their dues. There was probably 40 or 50 compared to a normal 200. So I'm curious because we run into all kinds of stuff. So I didn't want to say, hey, has anybody seen a Bigfoot? I started talking to a couple of people. I said, have you had anything strange happen around here? And one guy goes, yeah, there's ghosts up there. And I go, ghost? What do you mean ghost? He was camping, in his camper up there. He goes, I didn't see anything, but I could hear voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could hear voices. And we never have. And this other guy asked, and he was fishing this one low pond, and I knew right where he was at. And these trees are probably 10 or 12 feet tall. He was fishing one night, and something started shaking the trees violently and growling at him. So he was throwing firecrackers at it. And I had never heard of such a thing, lighting a firecracker. I'm like, why would you do that? He goes, to chase it off. I go, well, what if this thing's been shot at before, and you're just going to basically, upset it? I don't know, But you don't see nobody going up there camping. Nobody up there doing their partying. I mean, we pretty much any day of the week we can go there. We have the lake to ourselves.
Yeah, I'd be careful in that area, especially with the way it reacted to you. You might be right. It probably recognized that gun and recognized you were pointing it at it, and that's probably what got it to get up and walk off and not bother you anymore. But they're out at night, man. They're out during the day too, but they're definitely out at night. And I would just I'd be careful in that area, especially with the vocals you're hearing, the tracks your son found, just all of the odd things going on around that place. Definitely be careful.
Well, the one track picture that I sent you, the only thing we could measure with was his hat. And to see that track, the way it stepped, and I'm 6'4", and I can't step that far. I mean, there's no way I could take a step. It took a step down and then up the hill, and you could see where the foot had went, but you couldn't make out anything about the foot. And when he found that track, and when he found that, he was there with his girlfriend, and me and my wife was there with my granddaughter, and we were having a weenie roast. And stuff like that just stops. We don't do that anymore. And in case we do, well, my wife, she knows what's going on, kind of. She's never experienced any of it, but she wanted a gun, so we went out and bought her a little Ruger SR-22 that she's been practicing with, just in case. Because there's nights she'll need the truck and drop me off of the lake. And like one time this year, she had to come and pick me up because a thunderstorm was coming in where she has to get out and unlock the gate, because I'm an eighth of a mile from it. So it's good to have her armed at that period of time. But we did find, it was 2015 in the fall. We went looking, basically see if we could find any evidence. I sent you that one picture, that tree limb, the way that it split, about 12 feet off the ground, my son standing underneath it. This was a little farther, and for some reason we didn't have our phones with us that day. But it was a bowl, a low-lying area that was probably 20 feet across, surrounded by pine trees. Nobody goes there. And it had been cold, and it was probably 35 degrees then, and we found a perfect footprint that was between 4 and 5 inches long. And we only found one. And I picked a few pine needles off from around it, and my son looked at it, and he goes, there ain't no way there's some kid running around here barefooted. So,
yeah, it makes you wonder what's going on in that area. Definitely makes you wonder what's going on in the area. Do you guys still go out night fishing at night?
Oh, yeah, that's about all we do.
Yeah.
We probably hit that lake 3 times a week. And that 3 times, probably once or twice is night fishing. But since that happened last Friday, I think I'm pretty much done for the year. Because we usually fish until ice out, from ice out till it ices up. Because I think last year we fished until December 21st, because we were listening to Christmas music and catching bass. It was crazy. But the activity started about 4 or 5 years ago, what I told you before, when that deer was basically assaulted, beat to death on the bank. And we had never heard anything or had anything about it until then. I would have no problems, sitting on the bank night fishing or anything else, but nope, ain't no way. Not without a boat, we won't do that.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. Well, be safe while you're out there, will you? I wanted to ask you, when you saw the creature, what was your impression? Did you think it was more man-like? Did you think it was more ape-like? What category would you put it in?
Well, when it stood up, it had the silhouette of, I guess it was more a human silhouette. Other than the arms, it basically had a human outline. But when it turned to charge, I just seen straight, like, mountain gorilla. The whole demeanor of it. And like I said, is when it turned and it dropped. When I told you it had his hand, when it turned, it had his hands, arms in the air, and it dropped down, and it's like it went to push off of his back feet and then propelled with its arms, because I could see that part of it. So at one time, it looked like its arms were behind him on the ground, and his feet were almost forward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I haven't ever seen anything that ran that way. And it's just like boom, boom, that fast. And then the way it just kind of was squatted with its back kind of arched and its chest up, reared up, like looking at me like it was in, I don't know, I guess it was almost in like a defensive stance or attack mode or whatever. I don't know. But then it just stood up and walked away. I mean, it had two different traits. When it stood up, okay, it looked like it could be possibly a human type. But when it charged, it looked straight, flat out ape-like. What I personally think, I don't think they're, I don't think they're any type of human being.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that.
And I had years and years ago, this one super I worked with, in this one certain area, they had several Bigfoot reportings, and he was just all about it. And I'm like, I don't trust him. I said, I'd shoot it. And he's like, it's almost human. I said, almost don't get you off the hook, buddy. Right? And he just looked at me, and I said, this is the deal. Somebody goes, well, it's part human. The way I see it, he had a stick in his hand. I drilled him. I killed him. He's not talking. It says a word against mine. I'm not playing that game, but.
Yeah, and if you're ever in a position where you have to shoot one, I wouldn't shoot for the genitals, because everything I've gotten from investigating this is their genitals really aren't that big. It's not like humans. They're more like monkeys and primates. They're actually very, very small. I'd aim for the mouth, and that's where I would aim for. I wouldn't aim for the chest. I don't think you're going to bring it down with a 9mm. I would aim for the mouth and start unloading if you're ever in a position where you need to.
Well, if it would have actually picked something up or hit the water and broke any part of that water, I mean, I had the trigger squeezed just to the last point before it fired around. And you have to understand something. I don't want to hit something because we know there's more than one there. Because we have had rocks thrown at us from two different directions. We've heard whoops from different directions, and different things. And, I pretty much totally believe if there's one, there's a second one at least in that vicinity. I don't want to go ahead and take a shot unless I have to, because first off, I have to get that boat out of the water, and secondly, I have to get out of the truck to unlock that gate. It's not like you jump in a car and drive off,
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. Well, Pat, I appreciate you coming on and sharing it. I think it's a fascinating encounter. And I think that, in those areas, especially from fishermen, I get a lot of reports from fishermen. And usually it's aggressive type encounters where they're throwing rocks. I had a report one time where a fisherman got charged from the bank and actually ran into the water after him out there in Florida. And it terrified this guy. And I mean, with every right that it terrified this guy. It'd terrify me if that happened.
Because, you have seen them, but until you can you see something on TV, okay, reenactment, whatever, but until you're there and you actually see the size and mass of these things, it's just mind-boggling, I refuse to have this thing push me off a lake. I have been fishing there since 1978, and it's just not going to come in and take over. And like I told you on the phone earlier, I'm going out this weekend and I'm purchasing me an AR-15. Hopefully I'll never have to use it, but if I do, oh well. I'm not playing. If it wants to do its Bigfoot thing, that's fine, dandy. Just stay away. I don't want to see it. I don't have no desire to gift it. I don't want nothing to do with it. I'm just out there to fish.
Well, thank you again for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Wes.
It's interesting. I think if I was in that situation, I'd probably give up fishing. Just let him have it and take up golf or something. But I respect Pat. I mean, he's been fishing there since 1978. Nothing's going to run him off the lake. And I know it's not far from his home. And so that's why I was kind of, Pat and I off the air, I was like, hey, be careful pulling that trigger, especially if your home is very close to where you're fishing. But thank you again, Pat. I really enjoyed hearing your encounter. Sometimes the most interesting encounters are the ones that we don't see, where you're out camping and rocks get thrown at you, or you're out night fishing and rocks get thrown at you. And people doesn't really make sense in a lot of these situations. I know bears don't throw rocks. I think the audience would agree with me on that. And the only thing that really throws rocks, if you don't believe in Sasquatch, the only thing that throws rocks is people. But Greg, you were out near Mount Rainier, and you had a very interesting encounter out there. Would you mind starting from the beginning and telling the audience what you were doing out there and what happened to you?
Well, it was about, I was 20 years old. It was about 21 years ago or so, and a friend of mine was on leave from the Coast Guard, and it was actually my good friend's oldest brother. And so we decided to take him camping, and it was late spring, probably May or something around that time. And so we went out to a spot in Elby. We used to go out and camp, and we'd have to hike about a tenth of a mile in from the road. And you have this big open area where there's riverbank, and we had a fire set up, and all the guys that came along all had girlfriends, but myself and our friend on leave. And anyways, we set up camp. We're hanging out, drinking cheap beer and just talking, and the guys were with the girls. And so we decided to go down. It's, I'm going to say about 11 o'clock at night. We decided to take a lantern down to the river and set it along the beach and do some light fishing. And so we're casting out and talking and hanging out, and all of a sudden a rock comes from the other side of the river at us. And Hannibal didn't even pay attention to it at first. It came right at me. Like right next to the lantern where I was standing. And I'm like, whoa. And the first thing that went to my mind is, oh, those jerks are throwing rocks at us, And I'm going, what are they doing throwing rocks at us? And then another rock came, and another rock came. And by about the sixth or seventh rock, Hannibal's like, whoa, dude, are you? I'm like standing there. I didn't even know what to say. I'm just like, grabbed the lantern, and we headed back to the camp. And we got back to camp, and the coals were all down. The guys were in the tents fooling around with the girls. And so, it was eerie. It was really weird. And so anyways, the next morning we got up and went back down to the river, and we were on the sandy part of the river. The whole bank where we were at was all sand, like it's part of a sandbar. And, the river is running high too, because of the melt off coming from Mount Rainier. We're right between like Elby and Ashford. And, so it was just really weird that, the river was probably 100 feet across, and Hannibal's a pretty big boy. He's, I'm going to say 6'1" and probably 225, and he couldn't get a rock to go halfway across the river. And we just kind of looked at each other. It's like, what the heck was that throwing rocks at us? Bears don't throw rocks. I don't know what or who could have been throwing rocks or have the strength to throw these rocks. The rocks that were thrown at us were on the beach. And, they were anywhere from like a little larger than a softball and smaller than a basketball, like round river rock. Probably weighing 15, 20, 25 pounds. It was spooky when we started thinking about it. So
let me ask you, what did you think was going on at the time? Did you think that it was one of your buddies, or did you think this is something else going on?
Well, at first, yeah, we thought it was one of our buddies. And then, when we got back to camp, we noticed the coals were down, and they were, in the tents. And, we were just like, that was really weird. And we kind of talked about it a little bit, and we were just kind of like, oh, that was weird. And that's all we really thought of it until the next morning. And when Han tried to throw a rock across, and we saw that the river was just running too fast for somebody to cross right there. And literally on the other side of the bank, there was probably 100 feet of like a rocky shore up to trees. And then, the mountains, the next closest town was up and above a couple hills and into a town called Mineral. So we don't know, anybody could have hiked out of there. And that would have been a pretty gnarly hike. They would have had to know we were there. And so that's when we really started thinking about what the heck could have that been, And the only thing we could put our minds on was, maybe was this a Sasquatch? We knew a bear doesn't throw rocks. We knew that, to get a rock to go that far is these rocks are coming towards us. It was easily 110, 120 feet.
That's quite a distance to be thrown for that size.
Yeah, it was. That's what kind of got us off guard the next day. We were like, that was really weird. But we didn't have any other encounter on that trip. But we did. I think if you read the email that I sent you, that we did have something about a month and a half ago, or almost 2 months ago. It was the beginning of September. Me and my family and a couple of our friends decided to go do a hiking trip out of Indian Heaven. Me and my wife hiked there before we had kids, and our kids are now 4 and 6, and we decided, well, they can make this. It's only a 5-mile hike in, and a little bit of a hill climb at first, but they should be able to do it. And so we did it, and we drove out to Cougar, and then turned through Cougar and took the back ways up in Trout Lake area and up in the Cultus Creek campground where we park. And it was pouring down rain. Just the weather was just like it is tonight. I mean, pretty nasty and bad, but it was still, I was late morning, early afternoon, and we got our packs and our rain gear on and made a scramble towards the lake. And there wasn't a lot of people out there due to the weather. And anyways, we hiked into this area called Clear Lake. It's basically about 5 miles in, 5.5 miles in. We got up into the area and we were just drenched and met some campers right at the edge of the lake on the trail as you're entering towards the lake. And I asked them, I was like, hey, is there anybody camping on the other end of the lake? And they, no, we've been here for a couple days and haven't seen anybody. So I was like, great. So we pushed through and got about, I don't know, I'm going to say a couple hundred yards from them, maybe not even that. And I mean, it was thick bush. You could tell the trail was growing over. And so we started to push our way in, and my dog just stops. She's like, I'm not going any farther. And I'm like, come on, Lucy, come on, you big dummy. You know, I'm just pulling on her and tugging on her. And I mean, I literally took her collar off, and that was really weird. So I put it back on. I didn't even think about anything at the time, and put the collar back on and come on, drug her along. And we kind of pushed through and got to the back and end of the lake, which I'm going to say is probably a little more than a quarter mile away from the other campers, maybe a little bit farther. We got to the other end of the lake and set up camp and got dry clothes on the kids and got a fire going and kind of sat around and hung out for the evening and just ate dinner and got some calories back in us and relaxed and woke up the next morning, picked huckleberries and fished all day and had a great day. And that evening we, just as a joke, I said, I'm just going to do a tree knock and see what happens. And I do a tree knock, and you could hear it echo through the woods, and it was on a hollow log, and we hear a knock back. I'm like, oh my gosh, did you hear that? And I mean, all of us heard it. We were like, whoa. We're kind of looking at each other like, wow, that was weird. And so anyways, we just kind of continued our night just with that a little bit, thinking about that a little bit, not really bothered too much by it. And then my kids, we put our kids to bed, and we were watching, actually, I brought my iPad, and we were watching Guardians of the Galaxy just for some entertainment. And, within 10 or 15 minutes, the kids go to sleep, so I carry them to the tent. And I'm going to say probably another hour later, our friends, Russ and Steph, they decided to go to bed as well. And all of a sudden, my dog, starts looking up the hill and, shaking profusely and starts barking. I mean, just I can count. And the weird thing is I can count on one hand how many times I've heard her bark in the 11 years we've had her. She's not a barker. And I mean, she was frozen. My wife even trying to tell me she was right there, but it was different. She was nervous. She was like a wreck and shaking. And I'm like, what the heck? And so I take my light out and I shine on a hill, and I have a really nice LED lightweight flashlight, but it'll shine 200 yards. I mean, I can get a really nice beam on it. And I'm shining it up. I'm thinking, oh, it's got to be a bear or something. It's huckleberry season, and I don't know, so I'm shining the light up there and nothing. And, all of a sudden she just starts barking aggressively again. And so, I shine the light up there again. And then, I told my wife, I said, hey, Sarah, why don't you go grab your gun? And so she went to the tent and grabbed her 9mm out of her backpack and put it on her hip. I already had my 357 on my hip. And, because it was bear season, of course. And so, it was just really weird, and all of a sudden we start hearing sticks snapping, breaking, not like somebody stepping on a stick, but just like you're breaking a stick to put it in the fire. And we're like, whoa, we're freaking out a little bit. And I said, Russ, Steph, hey, Russ, you have your gun out because I don't know if there's a bear on the hill or what, but he's like, I hear it, man, I hear it. So anyways, I'm going to say an hour later or so, that stopped probably after about 10 minutes. 5-10 minutes of that, and the dog kind of calmed down, and we just kind of stood by the fire and stood there and kind of nervously, but I kept throwing tons of wood in, feeding the fire because I was a little spooked. And so anyways, we go to bed, and I'm going to say half an hour later, we heard something come down off the hillside, and literally we had pots and pans on downed log where we set up. I mean, they weren't even cleaned. So I can't say what it was by any means. I don't believe it was a bear, because a bear would have been into our pots and pans. I mean, there was food residue in there, and we kind of wiped them out, but they weren't clean. We didn't bring water up from the lake to clean our pots and pans yet. We're going to do that in the morning, and didn't mess with our pots and pans. I had a big bag of huckleberries, didn't mess with it, but whatever it was came down, walked up and over the log, walked by everything, walked right beside our tent and down towards the lake. And it was really weird. I mean, it was just really eerie. It sounded bipedal. I mean, it wasn't like a step with like, the second leg falling. It was like step, step, step. And I mean, you could hear the stepping. I mean, it was something bigger and heavier. It wasn't just a deer passing through or a dainty little animal coming through. It was something bigger. It was weird. It was, I'm still awed over it. And my wife, she keeps whispering stuff over at me. Because it was weird. It was just a real eerie situation. The next day, I was up on this other hillside, across from the hillside, wherever this, whatever it was, came down off the hill. I was on the other hillside, and I'm grabbing sticks and old trees and kind of, that were down on the ground. They're all, dried out, and dragging them down for the fire for the next day. And anyways, I'm dragging them down, and I just stopped. My hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I stopped. I stood up and looked like 360, just looking around. I felt like somebody was watching me. I mean, it was just out of the blue. I felt that way. It wasn't like I got up there and I heard crackling, but it just felt like somebody was watching me. I mean, it was just the most eerie, intense feeling. I grabbed this big stump and drug it down as fast as I could to the bottom of the hill and got back to the camp and got back to where my friends and my kids were. But it was a weird night. I mean, that night when I was in the tent, I didn't have my hands off that 357 all night long. I just had it right beside me, and hand on it, and I just figured if it's going to grab my tent or something, I'm going to unload. I don't know what else to do. I got my kids here with me. I don't know if it's a bear or what, and it was scary.
Yeah, that is scary. That's actually really scary. I know the area well that you're talking about. It's notorious for Sasquatch sightings. And the bears in that area, they are skittish. The black bears up in that area, they are skittish. They're not going to stalk you like that. But, I'm really glad that you came on, Greg, because I think a lot of people have this type of encounter to where they're out fishing at night or they're out camping at night, and all of a sudden they start getting rocks thrown at them. And it doesn't really make sense. People does not make any sense. It's a great way to get shot in the middle of the night. Start throwing rocks at campers. Start throwing rocks at hunters and see what happens. You're probably, even here in Washington State, they will start shooting at someone who does that. And it's fascinating. You and I both know bears don't throw rocks. I think the only things that throw rocks are humans and Sasquatch. But I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to share these encounters. I really think these are the type of encounters a lot of people have. So thank you again.
Well, I appreciate your time and allow me to come on. I've been listening to your podcast since this whole situation happened about a month and a half ago. I found you guys. I just typed in Bigfoot under my podcast on my phone, and Bigfoot Chronicles popped up, and I've become quite a fan. I travel the Pacific Northwest for a living. I literally travel from every health food store in Washington, Oregon, northern Idaho, and so I get to travel about the most beautiful place in the United States, in my opinion. But it helps me get along the road, and it's nice to have a conversation almost in the car going with some of the encounters that your guests have had on, and it just makes me kind of reaffirms what I almost feel is true. But again, I haven't seen one. I can't physically say I know for sure they're there, but I guess I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I haven't seen one.
Yeah.
But I've had some weird things happen, and I don't know how else to explain it besides it being a Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for listening, Greg, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, guys, and thanks for doing what you do, and keep doing it. We appreciate it. Great to hear.
Thanks again, Greg. And remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. I'd love to talk with you. I'd love to bring you on air and share it with everyone. So if you get a chance, my email is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let me know what you've seen. Let me know what you've experienced. And speaking of SasquatchChronicles.com, if you go there, you can actually sign up for additional shows. And if you're looking for a Christmas gift for yourself or for a loved one, go to SasquatchChronicles.com and click on the shop at the top. Again, some high-quality gear. Again, my two favorites, as I said in the beginning, I really do wear them all the time, is the gray sweatshirt and the black beanie. Absolutely love it. Thank you again for joining me tonight. Check out the boys with the Renegade podcast, Duke and my brother Woody. I jump on there and try and break Woody's balls every chance I get. But I get on there when I have time. But check out their podcast. It's the Renegade Podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Until next time, everyone, have a great night.
This is my